Hi everyone, thanks for joining me for another Facebook Live. I'm Dr. Alexis Conason. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm here in private practice in New York City, and I'm also the founder of the Anti-Diet Plan, which is a mindfulness-based program to help you get off the diet, overeating roller coaster and leave self-hatred behind and try to embrace a life full of compassion and acceptance and pleasure and joy. Thanks. Hi, Judy. It's nice to see some of you here joining me live. We're going to be experimenting with a shorter format today. So I would love your feedback after the event airs, and let me know what you think. I had been doing 30 minutes. I'm shortening them to about 15, 20 minutes today, just to make it a little more accessible for people. I know we're all busy. We don't always have 30 minutes to sit down, although I could go on a whole tangent about why I think it's really important that we should be making time for ourselves and creating that 30 minutes in our day to do something that is caring for ourselves. But I'm going to be trying to talk about today's topic in a little bit of a shorter time period. So love your feedback. Let me know what you think. And if you have any questions, if you're joining me live, if you have any questions, please feel free to write them in the comments box, and I will answer as much as I can as I'm talking today. So today's topic is going to be about emotional eating, and the question of, is emotional eating always a bad thing? We tend to think of emotional eating as something that we have to fight against, something that we always have to overcome, something that we have a lot of shame and guilt about, many of us, and it's like something that we should never do, right? Like I have a lot of, as a therapist, I have a lot of people, call me or write to me or come in and see me, and they're struggling with emotional eating, and it's like they're confessing a sin. I ate emotionally, forgive me, I need to do penance. And it makes me think about, like, is emotional eating really always such a bad thing? So my thoughts on this, and I would love to hear, if other people have thoughts on it, I would love to hear you chime in. But my thoughts are that emotional eating can be a completely normal and healthy part of our lives. It really depends on how we're using food for the emotional purposes. So, for example, has anyone here ever been to a birthday party and had a slice of birthday cake when they weren't hungry? Like, has that ever happened to anybody? If it has, that's emotional eating. We're eating based on celebration. We're eating because that's kind of like what everyone else is doing. Maybe we're eating because we want to have pleasure in our lives. Like maybe we're having that slice of cake because we want to, it looks delicious and we think it's going to bring us some sort of satisfaction and pleasure. And maybe it does. Maybe it is really delicious and it's enjoyable. And maybe we're eating because we feel uncomfortable at parties and the cake can alleviate some of that. Or maybe we just want to join in and, it's kind of like a way for us to celebrate along with the rest of the group. So for most of us, when we have a slice of birthday cake, or even when we have dessert, after dinner or out at a restaurant, it's rarely about being hungry. It's much more often connected to some kind of emotional, some kind of emotion, whether it's celebration, joy, pleasure, anxiety, whatever it is, and that's totally normal. Like I always say, if people only ate where they were hungry, we would never, like the dessert manufacturers would go out of business. Like birthday cake would not exist, because after you've had a meal, like usually we're pretty satisfied. But we can still enjoy dessert even if it is, stemming from an emotional reason. And that's a totally normal, I'd say like almost everybody does that sometimes. And same goes for if we're having a difficult time, if we're stressed, if we're bored, if we are feeling sad. Most people at one time or another turn to food, because food is comforting in the moment. It's effective in that moment. So I'm going to, just to answer the question of today's topic, is emotional eating always problematic? Like, no, I don't think it's always problematic. When I do think that emotional eating becomes problematic is when it is the primary way or the only way that we have to cope with our feelings. Because emotional, food isn't truly the best match for our emotional issues. It kind of might make the feelings go away for a little while, but usually the feelings return. So, excuse me, if I'm feeling sad and I eat a pint of ice cream, which I think is like the classic example. I mean, when I think of emotional eating, I think of what I call Bridget Jones' emotional eating. If people are familiar with the movie, I might be dating myself a little bit here. Hi, Laura. If people are familiar with the movie, like that's what I think of as like some sad seeming girl after a breakup crying into a pint of Ben and Jerry's. Like, that's kind of like the classic example of emotional eating. So first of all, I think emotional eating is much broader than that. Like, think about the birthday cake example. That's not usually what we think of as emotional eating, but I would consider that to be emotional eating as well, having a piece of birthday cake at a party. But even the kind of, of crying into a pint of, Ben and Jerry's ice cream or Haagen-Dazs or whatever, like that, might help in the moment, like alleviate some of the feelings, but is that going to fully mend your heartbreak? Is ice cream going to fully, heal the suffering that you're going through? No, probably not. The key thing is to, what often happens is that, we eat in response to emotions, and the emotions go away for a short period of time, but then they're still there afterwards. So when eating, what I think is the most problematic aspect of emotional eating is that when eating becomes the only way or the primary way that we have to cope with our emotions, we're not really dealing with our emotions. And that's the problem, because our emotions are important and we need to learn how to cope with our emotions. And I go much more in depth into this in the Anti-Diet Plan program, where we really do a deep dive into emotional eating and how to deal with our feelings, because we've kind of been taught by all, different realms of our culture that like feelings aren't okay. They're kind of messy. They're kind of yucky. We shouldn't have them. Maybe we're weak if we have them. Crying's a sign of, vulnerability. I can't tell you how many people I have say, like, I just can't cry at work. I can't cry at the office. I mean, like, as if the workplace is, we enter this building, this office building, and suddenly our emotions are left with the security guard at the front door. I mean, like, humans are emotional beings, and emotions are a natural part of the human experience, and especially if we're fully living. Right? If you're not experiencing emotions, and again, this is where I think emotional eating can become problematic. Like, if we're just using food to constantly kind of like put a Band-Aid over all of our emotions, we're not really feeling anything. We're not really dealing with our emotions. And that doesn't just mean that we get to avoid like the sad, anxious, worried, unhappy feelings. We're also not living with joy. We're not experiencing true happiness. We're not experiencing, vulnerability that can come to bring intimacy and all of these other things that are really part of living a full and rich emotional life. So that's when I think that emotional eating is problematic. It's when it starts to mask, when it becomes the primary way that we're dealing with our emotions, and we're not really dealing with our emotions then. So, that is, part, so I think it's kind of a complicated issue, because on one hand, we want to accept and understand that food food is an effective way in the moment, in that immediate moment, to get through a difficult situation. It's also a very culturally normative way that we celebrate things, that we express, happiness and excitement and joy, and that's all totally good and healthy and, not problematic. I think it also is problematic the way that we think about it, right? If you go out to that birthday party and you have that slice of birthday cake that is a completely, like pretty, I would say pretty unproblematic way of emotional eating. If you have a slice of birthday cake to celebrate somebody's birthday, I don't see much issue with that. But if you see issue with that and you beat yourself up and you say, oh, I can't believe I had the cake, I, broke my diet plan, I'm not doing any sugar. So it's kind of like the narrative that we put on it. And if you find that you start to beat yourself up with like guilt and shame, then it's a problem, right? Because often what I hear with people struggling with emotional eating is that it's not just the that the food helps to alleviate the emotions in the moment, but then the emotions come back and then they're also beating themselves up for having eaten. So it's like double whammy. Like now you still have like the first problem that you started off with, plus you have the second problem of like being really hard on yourself and being immersed in guilt and shame. So I think the more that we can just work to, kind of, I'm always saying like keep coming back at ourselves with a stance of self-compassion and kindness, and like understanding that in that moment that was just what we needed to, deal with those emotions, but also to deal with those emotions. And that's the hard part, obviously. Like, it's easy for me to say that we have to deal with our feelings, but feelings are hard. Like, I'm not going to lie, feelings are hard to deal with. They are scary. They are, can feel overwhelming at times. It's a lot. So as a psychologist, this is kind of the, my realm is the emotional realm, and how to help people really, better cope with our feelings. So if you are struggling with emotions that feel overwhelming and don't feel like things that you can cope with on your own, I definitely encourage you to seek out psychotherapy. Like, that's what therapists do. They help people talk about their feelings. I always love when someone describes, I don't work with kids personally, but like whenever I hear a therapist who works with kids describe what they do to children, they say, I'm the feelings doctor. I help people with their feelings. I help people feel better who are struggling with difficult feelings. And like, I think that description kind of goes well even for adults, to think about going to see the feelings doctor. But in all seriousness, like trying to work through some of these feelings and these emotions so they don't feel so overwhelming, because our emotions are important. They are messengers giving us important information about what is going on, and they're not going to go away. Hate to be the bearer of bad news, but like those feelings are going to stick around whether you're eating or not. So the key here, I think, is that, emotional eating can be a completely normal, healthy part of our lives. We all do it at one time or another. Otherwise, like I said, the dessert business would be out of business. It's also becomes problematic when it's the primary way or the only way that we have of coping with our feelings, because then we're not really coping with our feelings. So it's important to deal with those feelings, and often that does require, or that can require, professional support. And there's lots of great therapists out there who do this work, who can help you, cope with the feelings that feel overwhelming. And if you're experiencing emotions like chronic feelings of sadness or worry, it could be, not just like the regular run-of-the-mill feelings, but it could be depression, it could be anxiety, and there's lots of great treatment resources out there. So I really do encourage you to seek treatment. And again, if you're interested in learning more about how to overcome emotional eating and really do like a deeper dive into how to get reacquainted, or sometimes just like acquainted for the first time with our bodies, and learn how to honor the really important messages and signals that our body is giving us, and learn how to deal with our feelings, right? Without always turning to food. It's okay to turn to food sometimes. So when it's the primary way that we're turning to food, I do think it's something to address because those feelings are important and we don't want to neglect them, because neglecting our feelings is neglecting a part of ourselves, and we're worth it. Like, we deserve to have all parts of ourselves heard, nurtured, and valued. So if you're interested in learning more about the anti-diet plan, you can sign up for my free 30-day intro course on my website. I'm also in the process of creating a really in-depth, complete course on the anti-diet plan, which will be available, fingers crossed, I am hoping early September. I keep thinking this thing is going to be finished, and it just keeps going on and on and on. But that is my hope, that it will be finished in September. So if you sign up for my newsletter or the free course, you will definitely get first dibs notification, which will include some discounted pricing and a lot of really awesome bonuses that I'm super excited to share with you. So thank you all for joining me. Let me know what you think about the shorter format. And I hope I will see you next week, where we'll be talking about another interesting topic on our Facebook Lives, Wednesdays at noon. Hope to see you all then. Take care.